I'm pro-pornography, pro-prostitution, pro-homosexuality, pro-abortion, pro-legalization of drugs, okay? I'm a libertarian, okay? Oh, that was for drugs, apparently, over here. All right, okay. Who is the better role model for women, okay? Gloria Steinem and Kate Miller with their self-esteem problems, or me? I have no self-esteem problems, you know? All right.
She's written books. She's a professor of humanities. She's been called an academic Rottweiler. She's been called an anti-feminist feminist. As you just heard, the word mainstream does not come to mind when you hear her views on contemporary issues. We've waited for some time for her to be on Straightforward because I've always been entertained by watching her, and I learned too. Tonight, Camille Paglia. Camille, welcome.
Well, thank you. It's wonderful to be here with one of the great masters of modern media.
Thank you. I will push the book because it's Vamps and Tramps, but I got to ask you, we were talking before we started up today that you're very animated because you're Italian. I have a very plosive personality. Yeah. Are you like that all the time? I mean, do you ever get like real soft and low-key and sweet and
Well,
tender?
actually, at home as a writer, I'm very silent. I just sit there with the TV on, watching my soap operas and so on. But I'm an inflammatory personality, which is why I've had a disastrous academic career.
Disastrous academic career?
I was fired from Bennington. I mean, it's hard to be fired from Bennington for being too radical for Bennington, but I was. My first job,
When you said on that thing that Gloria Steinem has a self-esteem problem, now I know you were half joking, but probably not really, right? Do you think that's true?
Well, that was the subject of her book, Revolution from Within. Yeah, finally she got around to looking within and say, hey, there's a hole, there's a problem here. Now, Steinem was fabulous once. She really was. Early on, I was a big fan of hers, early 70s. But when she founded Ms. Magazine, she closed that magazine to all dissident feminist viewpoints. People like me were shut out. So actually, what they're getting with me is 20 years later, are sort of these buried problems within feminism have surfaced, all right? I'm sort of the return of the repressed. And she's compared me to a Nazi. She has been vicious toward me. She's going to have egg on her face. The way she treats one of the major women writers in the world right now. I have 3 best-selling books, and for Gloria Steinem to carry on in the way she does indicates how close, how anti-intellectual she is.
Yeah, it's interesting because she wants to shut down your point of view, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And this shows, you see, the way, and I look how what a powerful personality I am, all right? And you can imagine what she's doing, how these women of the feminist establishment run like tanks, okay, over less outspoken women who disagree with them.
You say you're pro-pornography, and I've read that before. A lot of women say that it's basically aimed at women and very degrading. How do you deal with that?
Well, I am definitely part of the pro-porn or pro-sex wing of feminism, but I tell people, look, consider the gay male world of pornography, which is extremely rich. Where is woman being degraded in that world? Clearly, pornography exists even without females in it. There's something very, very wrong with the way these women who are essentially wordsmiths are looking at visual images. This is the thing. If you are learned in the history of the visual arts, going back through the Renaissance to classical Athens and so on, you're not going to be that upset to see a nude woman in Playboy. But if your entire world is words, okay, all of a sudden, okay, the nakedness of a woman seems to degrading, objectifying, and I think that these people are sick, or they're provincial. I think that they're Philistines.
During the Justice Thomas thing, was it that time that you said a guy who has 4 years of Playboy definitely ought to be on the Supreme Court?
Oh yeah, right. I said, oh, he rents porn movies? Put him on the Supreme Court. And wherever I went, saying that in lectures, I got wild applause from whether you're talking from Harvard to anywhere else. I think that that Anita Hill, Clarence Thomas thing was a fiasco. A fiasco. Oh, ridiculous.
Well, she did sort of invite him over for a beer after he supposedly sexually harassed. That was the one piece that kind of troubled me. I couldn't.
That case was a crock. Now, I'm in favor of moderate sexual harassment guidelines and indeed lobbied for their adoption at my university in 1986 before any of this happened. But this is ridiculous. 10 years after the fact, a woman can haul you up in front of a public committee, right, and make you reconstruct lunchtime conversations you had. What is this? Stalinism? It was absurd. The whole thing was absurd from beginning to end. Right? And the credulity of the feminist establishment or of the East Coast media, okay, to the claims of Anita Hill, which seem to be increasingly fraudulent, outrageous. I've been stopped in the street by African Americans, working class African Americans, say they absolutely agree with me in my view of the Clarence Thomas case and also the Tyson case, because I feel that Tyson, whatever his prior sins, was railroaded.
She went to his room in the middle of the night or something.
Oh, right, yeah. Give me a break. He calls her up. She goes over there. She has a trench coat on over her pajamas. And then, oh, surprise. Oh, he's making a pass at me.
Have you been sexually harassed by guys?
Not really, because I defend myself by word and by deed. Okay, I'm an open lesbian. Okay, but the point is my experience has been bisexual. But no one messes with me.
What's wrong with men when you say it's been bisexual, but you chose women? What'd you find missing in men?
Well, I think I am too opinionated and too dominant a personality. I'm an egomaniac. I think it's very, very difficult to deal with me. My grandmother used to say...
So men can't take that because they need to be adored? Is that what you're saying?
No, I think that, well, before my book, Sexual Personae, finally got into print 5 years ago, you have to realize I was carrying the totality of that very controversial book in my head, and men want to argue everything out, okay? So it was exhausting, because even after my book is published in print, people still can't totally understand it. I think that's the problem, is that women deal with psychological things, and men want to hash out every single issue. And since I'm so opinionated, I really can't tolerate any other opinionated people.
Did you not enjoy sex with men?
Yes, that's the one thing. I'm physically attracted to men. See, that's my thing. I'm physically attracted to them, but I don't fall in love with them.
I thought you were looking at me kind of. I thought there was a little chemistry going here. That'll really stir them up, won't it? Rush Limbaugh said he met you at a party and gave you a cigar. You smoked it, and you two blew everybody's mind at the table. Is that true?
That's right. Yeah, it was at the 25th anniversary of 60 Minutes at the Met Museum like 2 years ago. Now, Rush Limbaugh's politics are quite different from mine, but I respect him as a principled thinker who has had enormous impact on this culture. Millions of people are his fans, including a lot of my Italian relatives in upstate New York. And I get so furious when I hear the kind of knee-jerk stereotyping and insulting of Rush Limbaugh that you get everywhere from Harvard to the New York media and so on. It's just childish. The inability to deal with Rush Limbaugh as an independent thinker.
Some people say that media buyers in some of the agencies are younger females today, and they hate Rush Limbaugh, so they don't buy spots on his show. Do you think that could be true?
Well, I think there's a lot of trouble coming from white middle-class women these days in the media, in Newsweek magazine. They're the ones who pushed Susan Faludi's error-filled book. They're the ones who fell on their knees in front of Anita Hill and so on. And these are women who they're male bashers because they have miserable lives. They have wonderful professional lives, but their relations with men have soured, and they blame it on men, when in fact there's a much larger sociological problem that has to do with failures of sexual identity at the end of the 20th century. So I think yes. Do they ever watch?
No, they never watch the show. But the good news is they failed because Rush is sold out on radio and he's sold out on television. So they kind of push their political point of view to try to shut him down, but it doesn't have any effect.
Whenever you talk to them, they either have never opened his book in the bookstore, okay, or even listened to him on the radio, and they have this peculiar, this stereotypical hysterical thinking. They've demonized him.
Rush is much more open-minded than his critics.
Oh yes,
I will say that.
He's a satirist. He's in the great. And when people say, "Oh, he's cruel," excuse me, he's in the great line of satire, going back through Pope and Swift, back to Juvenal and Horace and so on. To understand Rush, you have to understand the history of comedy, I think.
I think you're right. He is a great comedian. Camille Paglia, we've got some more questions and some more answers. Some a little strange, but you should stay with us just the same because she's very proud of these strange answers, and I like her, so let's come back.
We come here as women who earn 58 cents for every dollar earned by men.
Hey, hey, what do you say? Ratify the ERA.
React to that clip of Gloria Steinem there.
Well, slowly the wage gap is closing, but it was always, I think, artificially, structured because, in point of fact, a lot of women choose low-paying but safe and clean and predictable occupations. And I don't notice that many women trying to get jobs in the exterminating business, okay, in the roofing business. I don't notice them raking the hot tar and so on. Right? So still, Warren Farrell, in his very interesting book, The Myth of Male Power, talks about this, the way that women shy away from the commission sales jobs that are higher earning, but that they require 7 days a week of 7 days a week work, and that require an awful lot of psychological, aggressive, kind of disruptive pressures in your life.
You said that it's interesting. We were talking about Rush, and he uses the term feminazi. Now, the press has turned that into him meaning all women, which of course, he doesn't. He says there are about 25 feminazis in the world, Gloria Steinem being one of them. And these are the women who believe only what they believe and are very unhappy if you don't agree with them. And they're the women that he says want you to have an abortion whether you need one or not. I mean, it's that kind of group that is in the feminazi class. Do feminazis exist?
Absolutely. I, as a dissident feminist, okay, have been harassed and dogged by the feminazis, and so I have proved, okay, that Rush Limbaugh is correct whenever he uses that term. When I first came on the scene 5 years ago, I needed security guards to go on campuses. Brown University, I was sitting with an African-American security guard as 300 people are screaming in my face. You cannot believe, you know, the situations I have been in. I went out there, I took an incredible amount of abuse in establishing my views, and now people don't try to stop me anymore because I've influenced so many other people that there's a multiplicity now of dissident feminist voices. I mean, Christina Hoff Sommers, whose activism predates mine, in the early 80s, she was out there very courageously fighting single-handedly. There's her and Katie Royfey and a number of outspoken women who are feminists, but cannot tolerate the kind of ideological feminism that held sway for too long.
Did you always talk this fast? I mean, was this
Yes.
like in your home? I mean, your parents talk to me the way you did when you were younger once. Huh?
Well, I apparently was fairly silent, and then all of a sudden at puberty, I turned into this motor mouth. Okay, I'm the Joan Rivers of academe. Okay, no doubt about it. Okay, I'm manic. I'm manic, no doubt. Yeah.
What do you like when you're not on the screen? Are you depressed? Are you a happy person?
People say I'm a peculiar character. I'm manic without the depression. Okay, but I'm silent. My writing life, my thinking life, very quiet at home. I'm quite, you know, I like to watch TV. I don't like parties. You know, I have a cadre of close friends and so on. I don't run with the pack in New York. I know that I would be much farther in terms of my reputation in the literary establishment. If I went and I networked and backscratched, I hate that stuff. I'm a 60s person. Yeah, I don't do that. I don't do that. I live in suburban Philadelphia, and I keep on my own with my friends and so on.
What are the advantages that you see in a lesbian lifestyle as opposed to living with a man?
Well, I think that men need nursing. This is my theory. All right? I don't have the patience to nurse. I think that men require a kind of maternal relationship or sisterly relationship, perhaps, from women. Yeah, tremendous attention. And
hey, honey, get me a beer.
Yeah. Well, right. You know,
I mean, like if you and I were out on a date and we went over to my place and I said, hey, honey, would you get me a beer? Would you get, like, uptight? Or would you
no,
say?
because in Italian households, we believe in serving. Okay, serving food,
So
hospitality. Okay. It's a big part of the Homeric poems, where the serving of food and drink is not considered in any way degrading, but part of the sort of, almost like the Japanese tea service, part of the ceremonialism of everyday life.
So that's in you culturally.
Oh, I have no problem, like serving people. Yeah. I might hover, like my grandmother would hover. Finish that.
How did your family take it when you announced that you were sort of alternative lifestyle and so on?
Well, my father taught at a Jesuit school, and I actually was fairly discreet until he passed away, which was 5 years ago. My mother doesn't like...
Did you have to pretend? Did you like to have to bring guys to the house and stuff so that he wouldn't...
No, because my love life was a disaster. Even though I was an open lesbian, I had very little... I mean,
not much going either way,
no,
right?
I've struck out more times. Really, I mean, my book Sexual Persona would be a lot thinner if I had a better dating life in that period. But it got longer and longer. I had a lot of time in my hands. But my mother hates publicity. So my sister had to say to my mother, look, imagine how Mick Jagger's mother must have felt, okay? Because I'm everywhere now. Now it's like hilarious because I couldn't get published. You realize I couldn't get, I couldn't like, I couldn't
well,
get
the first day you
arrested.
showed up in a publisher's office talking like this, not knowing who you were.
Yeah.
Did they look at you strange and say there's a crazy woman out in the lobby? Because I mean, you talk very fast.
They would have seen only the manuscript. They didn't get the
they didn't get the full.
No,
they didn't get the full
no.
Thing until later.
7 major New York houses rejected Sexual Personae, and then 5 agents rejected it. And eventually, was published, took forever. And now, my life should be an inspiration to any writer who's out there getting rejected, to show that persistence and taking care of business in the long run really pays off.
This book is Vamps and Tramps. It's a paperback. You have it there on your screen.
It's my third bestseller in 5 years.
What do you think it is that people are drawn to you for? Why do they go in and buy a Camille Paglia book?
Well, I have seemed to have come into a period when thinking had gotten very, very conventional. And what I represent is really, I think, the best of the 60s, not the worst, but the best, which is, militantly pro-free speech. I don't look for approval from people. I go my own way. I'm a complete original. All right? I don't run along with the pack. And people have recently started comparing me to Ayn Rand, whom I did not read when I was young, but I have, so many people have compared me to her that I have begun to look at her and I realize...
Do you agree with her on some things? I mean, you're you come from the 60s, but she was really capitalistic. We got a break here in what, 30 seconds? 30 seconds.
Oh, I'm a capitalist. There's no doubt about it. Okay, I do believe that capitalism is inherently Darwinian, and we need some sort of safety net, it seems to me, for the very poor. But I do believe in radical individualism. But I have more respect for religion, I think, than Ayn Rand did, and I also am more of a comedian.
That's true. Camille Paglia. We'll be right back. Stay with us. We're back with Camille Paglia. Sorry about that. Madonna. I had Boy George on the other night, and he said that Madonna is a gay man trapped in a woman's body. What do you think he meant by that? That's an interesting...
Well, I say that about myself, too.
Do you really?
Yeah, oh, sure. That'll be true of me. Yeah.
Really?
Actually, yeah. Well, Madonna is very important in late 20th century sexual history. And,
but she's fading now.
She's in a low point. I hope she can recover herself. Many of the great stars of Hollywood did become box office poison and came back, like Bette Davis and Joan Crawford and Katharine Hepburn. I don't know.
Males,
we'll see.
too. Frank Sinatra was down and out. A lot of guys were down and out.
That's right.
And they come back.
That's
they make
right.
comeback. But it's tough when you've taken everything off. You know, if you've already taken off the seventh veil, it's a little tougher, it seems to me. It may be tougher for her unless she comes back as a virgin again.
Yeah, she had bad advice, and you know the low point was that book Sex, which was vulgar and stupid, and it was just imitating the great Helmut Newton, who a brilliant photographer, a German photographer, and her reputation has never recovered from that. We got tired of watching her take off her clothes. She's a great diva, a great star. I mean, Dietrich had class, and you know, Dietrich had sizzle, but then knew when to pull back and moderate her image.
Do you think that working class men have anything over sort of the media elite types or the elite types?
I've been saying
you talk about your Italian background. We were talking in the break about working with your hands.
That's right. That's right. Construction is the genius of Italian culture. Goes back to the Roman period and so on. There's no doubt, okay, that in my view, the white middle class in America, the upper middle class, lawyers and professors and so on, and media analysts, masculinity is non-existent. Men are shrinking. All right? And they say the more the white middle class men obey feminist rhetoric, the less women want them. I'm coming out of a culture where the men are men. I mean, I couldn't deal with them. The men are very authoritarian in Italian culture, but they were glamorous. I mean, glamorous, good-looking, competent men are in my tradition. So we have strong men, strong women. I look at these at these dorks and these wusses that pass for men. Okay, there is a terrible,
I agree with you.
That's right.
There are a lot of dorks and wusses around.
That's
I can
right.
tell you.
That's right. Now football. I'm a great fan of football, which very few feminists are. Okay, and I believe that men are men on the football field, and that is my the Dallas Cowboys. Or
what about the violence? They say, oh, this is men. Men are violent.
Oh, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely absurd. I mean, the human race is violent. I mean, nature is violent. I mean, a controlled aggression is what football is all about.
Tell me about I hate to bring this up, but I have to ask you because your observation of the current scene, the OJ Simpson trial. Tell me what your thoughts are about that. I mean, he clearly beat the woman up. I mean, most people think it'd be awfully hard to get blood all over Los Angeles and not have something to do with it. But what's your view?
Well, I think that the two of them, Nicole and OJ, had a sadomasochistic relationship. I don't think it was just one way. I think the two were obsessed with each other and that both were playing a very dangerous game. To understand that relationship, you have to have read my books. I've been explaining this all along, that even very civilized people can behave in barbarous ways when you're pushed beyond the edge, I mean, by the elemental force of sexuality. I think there are all kinds of dark impulses in the instinctual life that a lot of feminist rhetoric doesn't get to. It's always blaming the sex problem on men. But in point of fact, we are half animal beings. We are conflicted beings, half spiritual, half material. And this tension can lead to tremendous conflict. So I believe that the batterer is an infantile personality who's fixated on the mother in the woman he idolizes. I talked about this in the main essay, No Law in the Arena, of Vamps and Tramps. Before, in fact, I added as a footnote, OJ Simpson had just been arrested for the murder, and I tried to recreate the mindset. All the time I watch these talk shows for 20 years now, and I see these women come on, these pathetic women who've been harassed and persecuted and sometimes beaten up, and then there are cases where the women were murdered, okay, by the husbands, ex-husbands pursuing them. And what they would do is what Nicole did, which is so stupid. Draw the police in, okay, as a third party, instead of having the personal responsibility to terminate, okay, the emotional connection between yourself and the man, okay, this kind of waffling back and forth. They draw the police in as a third party. No policeman will ever be able to defend you against a determined murderer. That was the mistake. All right? The police cannot be there.
Well, what about the fact that had she? I mean, apparently she did finally break it off, and that's what got her killed.
Well, actually, apparently a year ago, he had gone on and was dating someone else, and she started up again with him. Masculine pride is, it has to be fully understood. I'm constantly talking about the power of woman, the dominance of woman in the sexual realm, and I don't like so much feminist rhetoric because it implies that man is dominant and woman is the victim. It's the opposite, okay? Men always suffer from sexual anxiety because of the enormity of woman as mother and woman as lover and so on.
They're raised by women. They're disciplined by women. They're spanked by women.
Correct.
Is that what you mean?
Correct. That's correct. All right. And I think that the strong heterosexual women that I know, okay, don't get themselves in these situations. So I'm 25 years now, a teacher, and I can see all the time these sort of whifty girls, all right, who always have the bad luck with boyfriends. They always end up with the abusive boyfriend. There are all kinds of weird psychological things under the surface that current feminist rhetoric cannot explain. You need to study Othello. You need to just study the Oresteia. The great literature, okay, is the key to understanding the human soul.
Wow. Okay, I'd like to take that course. Camille Paglia is here right after this. We'll be back. Stay with us.
If there is one message that echoes forth from this conference, let it be that human rights are women's rights and women's rights are human rights once and for all.
You have what's the chapter in the book that's about her?
Kind of a Bitch, Why I Like Hillary Clinton. It was published several years ago. It was published long before Mrs. Gingrich got into it. Yeah, it was published in London several years ago.
Do you like her because she's kind of a bitch? Or?
Yeah, well, I think she's a bitch. I love it. I'm kind of a bitch. But the thing is, I'm really sad what's happened to Hillary, because she started out, it seems to me, a very powerful figure and made one stupid mistake after another. She became like a Vita Perón, okay, with the healthcare thing. And she's just so naive. She's out of her depth, I'm afraid, in the position she has and in Washington. I'm voting for Clinton again. I hate to say, okay, there's a poster up in my office already. Clinton Gore.
Colin Powell doesn't interest you.
I am leery about a military man taking over the government without, he doesn't have even the experience in consensus building that Eisenhower had. So I'm somewhat concerned about that. But I would love to vote for an African American for president.
Mm-hmm. The conference in China, that clip came from that conference in China. It seemed to me an odd place to, I mean, if you're going to go to China to talk about human rights, then you ought to go ahead and talk about it and say, hey, look, you Chinese guys ought to get on the bandwagon here. But they went over there and sort of pulled their punch, it seemed like to me.
Well, no, I actually am glad that the name China was not mentioned from the podium, because after all, that was the host country. As an Italian, I don't think it's right that you accept the hospitality and then go over there and
trash her.
And trash her. And I think it was severe enough what she said. But there's a kind of sermonizing quality, I'm afraid, to her delivery that gets on my nerves. A kind of like a pose of moral superiority that I don't think that the Clintons have any right striking.
Mm-hmm. They're trying to. How do you equate the feminist movement with the civil rights movement? I mean, what are the differences? Because I think the feminists try to pattern themselves after the civil rights movement.
Yeah. Well, I myself have felt that that even in gay activism, there's too much trying to cloak themselves in the moral cloud of civil rights movement. Civil rights movement is one of the principal reform movements of our time. Obviously, it's had enormously positive effects. I can still remember traveling through the South and seeing colored fountains and white fountains and so on.
Yeah.
You know, and so I'm glad those days are past us. But I think that that the feminist movement has become very Stalinist. That is, it's anti-art bias. I mean, the civil rights movement never interfered with art in the way, let's say, that the feminism has. It has become a kind of a school marmish
control your behavior kind of thing.
Yeah.
What about what is it in the gay rights movement that causes gays, some gays, not all gays obviously, to run up and shout, I'm gay in your face and spit on you and throw condoms at you? In the church? I mean, I don't run up to people and say, I'm straight, and throw anything on them. I mean, that's none of their business, none of my business.
Well, I think it's an important part of the gay liberation movement as it was spawned after the Stonewall Rebellion in 1969, that people come out and admit their homosexuality. But I agree with you about the intrusion into churches. That's how I became very unpopular with my fellow gay activists and so on. I said that that's sacrilege, and one has no right to intrude into any sacred space. It's a disaster. That was a disaster for the gay movement. I spoke against it. I think the tactics tactics have act up. We're very counterproductive. We're still paying the price of it. I oppose. I read a column for The Advocate, the national gay magazine, and I oppose the intrusion of gay subjects into the primary school curriculum, condom distribution in schools. I think it's ridiculous. It belongs in public health clinics and so on. And I think that you know, like the rainbow curriculum was stupid right down the line. The way it radicalized grandmothers who came out, and I mean, I as a college teacher in an art school, okay, I have to be very cautious how I bring up sex. For heaven's sakes, the students, even in art school, okay, are very tentative about sex. How dare these activists who are not scholars, who are not teachers, tell anyone, okay, what should be taught in the classroom? Okay, you know, gay issues. We have to teach attitudes to eradicate homophobia. Excuse me, homophobia is ultimately ineradicable in my view, because there's a stage that boys pass through on the way to manhood, okay, where they push themselves off from anything not manly. So this is the bad news that I have brought to the discussion of homosexuality. I think there are psychological factors that lead to homophobia. It's not out there in the culture. It cannot be fixed. It cannot be cured by more regulation, more Stalinist oversight, you know, of our mental lives.
So you think some of this militant gay stuff is not as productive as I mean, it seems to me that in today's society, the law applies to everybody. If anybody's harassed or pushed around or discriminated against for any reason, that the law sort of protects them and they have certain recourse under the law. Why do we need special legislation for gays?
I agree with this. I think that there was too much a rush to judgment on the part of gay activists to think that we need special protections. I mean, where's the evidence for this? Okay, in my entire life, I'm 48 years old. Okay, I haven't seen, you know, any gay person being denied employment or fired. I have no examples in my experience of any gay person being denied housing. Okay, that is ludicrous. But it was true for African Americans, and it is true for African Americans. I think it's obscene, okay, to apply the experience of the whole historical experience of slavery to, in fact, the situation with gays. Any gay can pass, okay? If you put on a dress, okay, as a man, obviously, and go into a restaurant, you're going to be recognized in that sense. But I, as a lesbian, as a woman, as an Italian American, I can walk into any place in this country, and it often strikes me when I go into take a small restaurant somewhere out in the countryside that no black person, okay, could feel as free doing that. I think there still is a historical, carryover of from the barbaric past here.
I got to wrap it up. That's the end of the show. Camille Paglia is here. I've wanted her for a long time. She's out. Will you come back?
Sure.
We'll do it again. I like her because if I say to her, you know, you're very pretty, she doesn't get mad at me. You know, she doesn't take that out on me.
Right.
Right? Good to see you. See you next time.